Now let's talk about Neighbors' teammate, Brian Thomas Jr., who we were talking a little bit about before. He's 6'3", 209. He's right up there in size too. 4'3", 340. Shades of a second faster than Neighbors himself. Had 68 receptions for 1,177 yards, 17.3 yards per reception, and 17 touchdowns. Now, obviously, it's a little bit easier for you when you are on the other side of Neighbors and not getting top coverage. But that being said, this guy is a fantastic wide receiver. He would probably be the number one off the board if those other three weren't there in any other season.
Well, there's a lot of these guys that are posting these numbers now for the rest of the list. And this is what separates the top three guys from everyone else.
Yes.
Is that the top three guys not only had the physical attributes, not only had the production, but they were elite route runners at every level, at all three levels. Where I think the one flaw I have for Brian Thomas Jr. after watching some film is that he lacked separation on the mid to short routes. He was great deep. He was great at creating separation on deep routes, but he really lacked separation and the route running ability at the mid-level. And if you're going to be an NFL receiver and you're going to be a number two, you have to bring more to the table. I mean, you look at Jalen Hyatt from last year, where he's a one-trick pony, and if you struggle creating separation on the short and intermediate routes, you're not going to get the ball. And imagine if here's a great example. What if Brian Thomas Jr. went to Carolina?
Yeah.
He's not fitting in there well because he's not creating that separation. What do they need more than anything else? And now they have Deontay Johnson. But
who's your number one at that point? But you can make the same argument that with Deontay Johnson and the Steelers is Deontay Johnson was the guy getting open. George Pickens wasn't creating good enough separation in the short to intermediate routes. He was only good at creating the deep routes down the sideline. It's the same type of player.
It is, but we haven't seen that breakout from George Pickens yet. And
we've seen a little bit here and
glimpses.
there, but we're not consistently. I agree with you. I think that's one of the things that creates.
Well, there's another guy on this list that I'll compare to George Pickens.
But I agree with you. I think I only bring that up because you brought up the Panthers and Deontay Johnson.
Right.
But someone like Brian Thomas Jr., he gets picked up by, I don't know, Cincinnati, who's most likely where T. Higgins requests a trade if that ends up happening on draft day, similar to what happened with Tennessee in the past. What if he goes to a squad like, I don't know, the Raiders and is right there with Devontae Adams, these guys that do create separation early on.
But he's the number three there.
Yep, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, do you think he's a better prospect than Jacoby Myers?
What I think is a great fit for him is Atlanta. I think if Atlanta trades back, they can get one of these other guys.
You wouldn't be taking him at 8. But yes, I agree. I think Atlanta would be a good spot. But I think Atlanta could get one of these day 2 guys, and it would be a great spot too.
I think Neighbors, if the Atlanta can find a way to get Neighbors, that's just crazy. I think that they should. If they can trade up a couple spots and go and get Neighbors.
2 spots, it was what it would take to get the Giants right now in most of these mock
that's
drafts.
going to be an elite spot for him. But I think Brian Thomas Jr., he's going to be productive at some point. But I think that there's and the mid-tier route running, he does create separation deep. So creating the separation at the mid-level and the short level, he will get better at.
Yes.
And I'm not too worried about him. I still think he's a first-round talent. He'll go and end up on a team, but it's a matter of where does he go, right? And there are certain situations where I think he's better off than others. I would like him in maybe New Orleans.
I mean,
Tampa.
What about the Jets?
No.
I mean, I'm just saying. I'm not saying they should do it at 10.
I don't think they're in a good position.
We're not talking about position to take, but I'm saying we're just talking about teams in general that he would be successful.
Denver would be a good spot.
Denver
for him.
would be great.
Denver would be a good spot for him, and they're in a position where they could go and get him.
But again, they're not in a position because they need somebody to throw him the ball.
Right.
But I'm just saying, I agree with you. That's a perfect team for him right there in this situation.
Right.
I like it. I mean, he'd be fantastic for Kansas City. Obviously, they're not in a position to get him unless they trade up. But I agree. If he goes to a place that has established pass catchers and he can complement them, he can actually get himself and vault himself into a premier pass catcher for that team. At
Buffalo would be a good spot. Again, he's probably not going to end up there. There's a lot of teams where I think he ends up being a really good talent opposite a number 1 premier wide receiver. Dallas is another one where I think he would fit in really well. But I mean, you could say that about a lot of the guys that we're going to talk about on this list from here on out.
Well, but I think to me, he's probably one of the more premier ones on that complimentary coming into the league as a wide
He's the
receiver
top
two
of
guy.
the second tier.
Yeah, I agree.